In the dimly lit hallway of a luxury hotel in the early 1980s, Michael Jackson found himself pressed hard against a cold wall, his breathing fast and shallow, his eyes wide with genuine terror as a violent mob of aggressive shadowy men surged forward with dangerous intent, their hands reaching out like claws, their voices harsh and threatening. And just as those menacing fingers were about to close around the biggest entertainer on planet Earth, a massive figure stepped directly out of the shadows and planted himself like an impenetrable brick wall between Michael and the attackers. And when that towering silhouette turned slightly under the flickering hallway light, the crowd instantly recognized the unmistakable profile of Muhammad Ali, the greatest heavyweight champion the world had ever known. And in that single frozen moment, the entire energy shifted from predatory chaos to absolute stillness because every single man in that mob understood without a word being spoken that they were now facing a different kind of danger entirely. But to truly understand how Muhammad Ali came to be standing in that hallway protecting Michael Jackson from a violent breach of security, we need to rewind the story back to the beginning of that extraordinary night, and even further back to understand the unique and secret bond that connected these two cultural giants in ways the public never fully understood. Michael Jackson in the early 1980s was not just famous. He was operating on a level of global celebrity that had never been seen before in human history. His album Thriller was shattering every record imaginable. His face was on every magazine cover. His music videos were cultural events that stopped the world, and everywhere he went he was mobbed by thousands of screaming fans who wanted to touch him, see him, take a piece of him. But what the public did not see behind the glittering performances and the moonwalk and the sequin glove was that Michael's fame had attracted a much darker element, a dangerous underworld of obsessed stalkers, racially motivated hate groups, and criminal figures who saw him as either a target or a trophy. Michael Jackson, despite his immense power on stage, was a deeply gentle and vulnerable person in real life. He was soft-spoken, he was trusting, and he carried a kind of innocence that made him an easy mark for people with bad intentions. And while he had professional security teams around him, there were moments when even the best trained bodyguards could be overwhelmed by sheer numbers or caught off guard by coordinated attacks. And this particular night in the early 1980s was shaping up to be one of those moments. Muhammad Ali understood the weight of crushing fame better than almost anyone alive because he had carried that same burden for 2 decades. He knew what it felt like to be the most recognizable face on earth, to have millions of people project their hopes and fears and anger onto you, to be loved and hated with equal intensity. But Ali also had something Michael did not have. He had the physical presence and the hard-earned reputation of a man who had stood in the ring with the most dangerous fighters in the world and beaten them. Ali had faced Sonny Liston and Joe Frazier and George Foreman, men who could kill with their fists, and he had stared them down and outfought them. And that gave Ali a kind of shield that fame alone could not provide. Ali had met Michael Jackson years earlier, and the two had formed a quiet friendship that few people knew about. They were both black men who had broken through impossible barriers to reach the absolute pinnacle of their fields. They both understood what it meant to be scrutinized and criticized and threatened simply for being excellent and visible and unapologetically themselves. And Ali saw in Michael a younger version of the vulnerability he himself had felt before the world hardened him. Ali had become a master at using his voice and his fists to protect himself, but Michael had only his music and his art. And Ali quietly decided that when Michael needed protection, he would be there. On this particular night, Michael Jackson was staying at a hotel after a high-profile event. The details of the event itself have been lost to time, but what is known is that word had spread about his location and a large crowd had gathered outside the hotel. Most of them were genuine fans hoping for a glimpse or an autograph, but mixed into that crowd were individuals with far more dangerous intentions. There were men who had been making threats, men who had criminal records, men who saw Michael as a symbol of something they hated or as a vulnerable target they could exploit for money or notoriety. And as the night went on, the crowd outside grew larger and more aggressive. The energy shifted from excited to volatile, and the hotel security began to realize they were losing control. Michael's own security team had set up a protective cordon in the hallway leading to his suite. The plan was simple: keep everyone away from his floor, allow no one to pass. But plans have a way of falling apart when faced with determined chaos. And sometime after midnight, a group of men who had been waiting and watching made their move. They did not ask permission. They did not wait in line. They simply rushed the security checkpoint with overwhelming force, shoving and pushing and using the sheer momentum of bodies to break through the barricade. And within seconds, the carefully controlled perimeter collapsed like a dam, giving way to a flood. Michael Jackson heard the commotion from inside his suite, the shouting, the crashing, the sound of something going very wrong very fast. And when one of his assistants burst through the door with panic written across his face and said they needed to leave immediately, Michael knew this was not a drill. They moved quickly into the hallway, hoping to reach a service elevator that would take them down to an underground garage where a car was waiting. But they did not make it because the mob had already reached his floor. And suddenly Michael found himself face to face with a wall of aggressive men whose eyes held no warmth, no admiration, only a kind of predatory intensity that made his blood run cold. His security team was still fighting to regain control, but they were outnumbered and overwhelmed. Some of them were being physically held back. Others were trying to push through from behind. And in that chaotic, violent moment, Michael Jackson was essentially alone. He backed up instinctively until his shoulders hit the wall. His hands came up defensively, and the men kept coming, their voices harsh and overlapping, some yelling his name, some yelling things he could not understand, and their hands reached out toward him, grabbing at his clothes, his arms, and Michael felt a wave of pure, helpless terror because he understood in that instant that this situation was completely out of his control and that something very bad was about to happen. And then, without warning, without announcement, a figure stepped directly into the space between Michael and the mob, a figure so large and so powerful that it seemed to fill the entire hallway. And that figure was Muhammad Ali. Ali had been staying in the same hotel. Some say he had come specifically because he had heard Michael was there and he knew the crowd outside was growing dangerous. Others say it was pure coincidence. But whatever brought him to that hallway at that exact moment, his presence changed everything. Ali did not run. He did not shout. He simply walked forward with the calm certainty of a man who had never been afraid of any human being in his life, and he positioned himself directly in front of Michael Jackson like a living shield. The men in the mob recognized him instantly. How could they not? Muhammad Ali was one of the most famous faces in the world. But more than that, they recognized what he represented. This was not a pop star. This was not a gentle artist. This was a man who had spent years getting punched in the face by the most dangerous fighters on earth and punching back harder. This was a man who had knocked out Sonny Liston, who had absorbed the crushing blows of George Foreman and then destroyed him in Zaire. This was a man who had gone to war in the ring and won. And every single person in that hallway understood on a primal level that Muhammad Ali was not someone you wanted to fight. Ali did not need to throw a punch. He did not even raise his voice. He simply stood there, his massive frame blocking all access to Michael. And he looked at the men in front of him with the cold, steady, utterly unafraid eyes of a heavyweight champion. And in a voice that was quiet but carried the weight of absolute authority, he said something along the lines of, "You want to get to him? You go through me first." The effect was immediate and total. The mob stopped moving. The hands that had been reaching out dropped to their sides. The aggressive energy that had been building like a pressure wave simply evaporated, because every man standing there understood that touching Michael Jackson now meant dealing with Muhammad Ali, and that was a fight nobody in that hallway was willing to take. The silence stretched out, tense and fragile, and then slowly, reluctantly, the men began to back up. They did not run. They did not apologize. They simply moved backward, creating space, their eyes still on Ali, watching him the way you watch a dangerous animal. And Ali did not move. He just kept staring them down, his body language radiating the message that he was ready, that if anyone wanted to test him, he would welcome it. Behind him, Michael Jackson was breathing hard, his heart pounding, his mind still catching up to what had just happened. He had been seconds away from being grabbed, hurt, maybe worse, and now he was safe, protected by a man who had stepped into danger without hesitation, a man who had used nothing but his presence and his reputation to turn a violent situation into a quiet retreat. And Michael felt a wave of gratitude and relief so intense it almost buckled his knees. When Ali was certain the threat had passed, he turned slightly and placed one massive hand on Michael's shoulder, a gesture that was both protective and reassuring. And he said something quiet that only Michael could hear, something lost to history, but likely along the lines of, "You are okay now. I have got you." And then Ali did something that cemented this moment in the memories of everyone who witnessed it. He wrapped his arm around Michael Jackson's shoulders, not roughly, not like a bodyguard manhandling a client, but gently, like an older brother protecting a younger sibling. And he walked Michael down that hallway, past the men who had tried to attack him, past the scattered security guards who were still regrouping, and the crowd parted like water. No one dared to step forward. No one said a word. They just watched as Muhammad Ali escorted Michael Jackson to safety. The two men reached the service elevator. Ali stayed with Michael until the doors closed, and only then did he step back, his job done, his presence no longer needed. And as the elevator descended, Michael looked at the man who had just saved him, this legend, this fighter, this king, and he understood in that moment that true greatness is not just about talent or fame. It is about what you do when someone needs you. It is about stepping into danger when you could easily walk away. It is about using your strength to protect the vulnerable instead of exploiting them. The story of that night was never widely reported. Michael Jackson rarely spoke about it publicly. Ali never bragged about it. It was simply one of those moments that happened between two men who understood each other in ways the world never fully grasped. But those who were there, the security guards, the hotel staff, the men in that mob who slunk away in shame, they remembered. They remembered the night Muhammad Ali stood between Michael Jackson and a violent attack and stopped it with nothing but his presence, his reputation, and his unshakable courage. In the years that followed, Michael and Ali remained friends. They would see each other at events, they would talk on the phone, and there was always an unspoken understanding between them. Michael knew that Ali had saved him that night, and Ali knew that Michael understood the cost of fame in a way few others could. They were both men who had given everything to their art, who had been worshipped and attacked, loved and threatened. And in each other they found a rare kind of kinship, the kinship of those who have stood at the absolute peak and survived the dangers that come with it. Muhammad Ali passed away in 2016, his legacy secure as one of the greatest athletes and most courageous men in history. Michael Jackson passed away in 2009, his music still echoing around the world. But that night in the early 1980s, in a dimly lit hotel hallway, those two legends stood together, one protecting the other, one proving that greatness is measured not just by what you achieve, but by how you treat those who need you. And in that moment, Muhammad Ali showed the world once again why he was called the greatest, not because he could throw a punch, but because he knew when to stand between danger and innocence. And he did it without hesitation, without fear, and without asking for anything in return. True kings protect each other. That is the lesson of that night. True greatness is not just about being the best. It is about using your strength to shield the vulnerable. And on that chaotic, dangerous night, when Michael Jackson needed protection, Muhammad Ali stepped out of the shadows and became exactly what the moment required: a guardian, a shield, a friend, and a reminder that some men are not just famous. They are forces of nature who change the world simply by being willing to stand in the right place at the right time and refuse to move.